Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host Brian West, here to give you your top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made it throughout the week. Now, these top 8 stories are only documented for records and to highlight topics for those in the business of talk radio, talk media, and those who just want to stay informed. Now, let's get to the top 8 stories that made it into The Mediator this week. Story number 1. STDs, Lyme disease, and the HTLV-1 virus. There are hidden consequences when someone becomes careless. Let this be known. And the consequences usually result in the spread of something fatal. The gift that keeps on giving. The reality is that there has been a rise in cases of Lyme disease across the United States over the years. If you don't know, Lyme disease is transmitted to humans through ticks. And symptoms of the disease include fever, fatigue, and rash. The disease can even cause serious damage to the joints, heart, and nervous system. But don't panic. Just take note that ticks need to be attached to the body for at least 36 to 48 hours before any disease can be transmitted. You may also want to keep in mind that in an age where sex is prevalent and everybody's doing something to please themselves, some people forget that STDs are still running wild. And treatment can be very, very expensive. If you don't believe me, ask people in Australia. They've been seeing a rise in the virus known as the cousin of HIV. The virus is known as the HTLV-1 virus, and it's been leaving many victims dead as the country tries to stop the spread of the infections. Headlines like these often creep in and out of the news, but it may be wise to take caution when venturing out and exploring nature. It may also be wise to beware of who you choose as your sex partner and make sure you follow the proper procedures when engaging in physical activities, if you know what I mean. Abstinence is always an option. Story number 2. Take notice of nature because it shows no mercy. One dirty war tactic learned from nature is that some things are just out of human control, human hands. We know this because it was just a matter of time before a volcano erupted on the island known as Hawaii. Some other natural disasters that people have been taking notice of is the fact that a 6-story deep sinkhole opened up on a farm in New Zealand. And don't forget about the all-knowing Yellowstone National Park. There are some scientists that believe that it's just a matter of time before the park erupts, but some scientists say there's nothing to worry about. Such headlines like these will keep scientists busy and will only make headlines unless something happens that sparks people's interest. Story number 3. 2 things that could change the course of the future. It's just 2. There are 2 headlines and developing stories to keep an eye on that could change the course of the future. Headline and developing story number 1. Will North Korea and Iran reveal their hand when it comes to their nuclear weapons program? The simple fact that North Korea and Iran have been able to drag the United States along this far, along with surrounding nations, keeps people in awe when it comes to foreign policy. It also remains a hot topic. The second headline and developing story to keep an eye on is the state of Washington and the upcoming elections. There is a fact going on that there is a power struggle going on in Washington. The next election may leave voters more frustrated with the direction that the U.S. is headed in regards to not only trade policies, but a dwindling workforce. These people are having a hard time finding workers. It seems that a huge number of employers say that they want to hire people, but they just don't trust anyone and just can't deal with the baggage that many workers come with in this new environment in the United States. Keep an eye on this developing story. Story number 4, In God We Trust. Now, you may not know, but this debate on whom or what the United States public put their trust in is still on the minds of those who don't believe. They don't want anything to do with In God We Trust. It may sound odd, but there is still a majority of Americans that do not believe or think it's fair to have In God We Trust on anything public or anything that belongs to the public. Now, although most Democrats and scholars cannot grasp human behavior or why people do what they do, a majority of Americans still put their trust in God. Keep an eye on this story because those who oppose such wording may use history and slavery to plead their case against keeping such a phrase out of the public's eye. Witnessing what's been going on across the United States, don't be surprised if this story surfaces into something much more. That is why the election cycle will not only keep you entertained, but will open up your eyes to something deeper within the human psyche. Something deeper that may eventually someday bring you to your knees. Story number 5, the Wild Wild West. Giddy up. Race wars, border walls, and police protests, police violence. These are just a few things that have people concerned about the future of the Wild Wild West, the West. The truth is that some groups are going to the extreme to get in the power seat of the White House, or just getting the power seat in general. A lot of people want to rule the world and they want to push their agenda, but in capitalism you have to have money to do so, and that's a big problem for some people because they don't feel like they're getting a fair shake because they don't have the money but they have the knowledge. It may be wise to keep an eye on this story because some activists are still having a problem with understanding the value of time and the dollar. It means time is money. Some people don't get it. This story may be the centerpiece to two concepts of thinking that people battle with every day, and that's the concept of who's right and who's wrong when it comes to capitalism, and is capitalism fair? Some people do not believe that capitalism is fair. Story number 6, how do you save the private sector, or how do you keep it afloat? When a big publicly traded corporation moves into a city, you may notice that a small family-owned business moves out. There is a new reality setting in as Americans hold on to the value of becoming an asset to their own communities, if they can. This concept is the driving force of every community, being an asset and being valuable to the community. The concept of being an asset to the community is the driving force and may continue to cause a problem as businesses in the private sector try to keep up with the other guys moving in. I recommend you keep an eye on this still developing story because it may affect you and your community. The fact remains that a lot of small businesses are going under, and the big reason why they're going under is because of competition. Story number 7 and the final 2 stories that made it into the media this week. The reason why you should be reading. Wisdom, knowledge, strength. Most people who become very successful at what they enjoy doing is because they take the time to read, if you didn't know. This is why most parents are catching on and telling their kids to pick up a book rather than watching the television. Expect this story to stay in action as many students struggle with college debt and parents try to find a recipe that works for their child to become successful. Some people are choosing the bookstore other than college. They're choosing to learn themselves and improve their own skills. Story number 8, and the final story that made it into the media this week. Protecting journalists. In heated debates about fake news, it seems that journalists are starting to fight back, and it's getting heated. It's getting hot. It's getting nasty. If you don't know, a lot of journalists have not only had to suffer, but they've actually lost their life trying to spread valuable information. Many have even served in combat zones, war zones that is. So when people attack the press and make claims about fake news, it may be wise to do some research yourself and examine the sources. Although some news outlets may not be accurate, the concept of keeping you informed should always be the number one goal of a good journalist. That's called good journalism. And when leaders target journalists, that may be a good sign that they're hiding something. This trend happens a lot in countries that are ruled by dictators. Now, keep in mind that there is often a trail of blood attached to every big story. Well, I want to thank you so much for tuning into the media this week with me, Brian West, and please don't forget to show us some support and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you want to show us some more love, go to our website by buying something, clicking something, watching something, or just reading something, or you can just sponsor a program. Well, I want to thank you so much for tuning into the media this week with the Doctor of Mediation, me, Brian West. Have a good week, everybody.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The mediator